Hi everyone. Today I want to talk to you about a new design I've come up with for bug-resistant build constraints. To start off, this is a design draft. It's not a proposal. And part of the reason is that it is a large change. It's user visible. It requires changes to documentation. The changes are across many packages. It applies to all code. It doesn't quite require changes to the language spec. It may require changes to introductory documentation, however. And just in general, it's the kind of thing that affects everyone who writes Go code. And so we want to get added feedback before starting the proposal process to try to have a sort of more relaxed initial feedback and without the sort of panic and urgency that people sometimes feel when something has entered the proposal process. And just to set expectations, the fastest possible timeline for this work would be to land in Go 1.17, which is in August 2021. So what is a build constraint? A build constraint is this line here that says, only build this file on Linux or Windows. And similarly, this line here says only build it on AMD 64, x86 64 systems. And together, these say that you only build this file on Linux or Windows and only AMD 64 on those. And so this means essentially this expression. And so the question is, why don't we just write that expression? Well, not to justify where we got, but to explain where we got so that we can understand how we can move forward. I just want to go through a little bit of the history of how we got here. The original syntax was added in September 2011, and it was originally this line that said // build with no space, and then Linux or Windows 386. And so we decided that this wasn't quite distinctive enough. The initial code reviews for adding these to our existing files said, well, it looks a little bit like a typo that just the space was forgotten. And then if you put the space in, it stops working. And so we changed the trigger from being the missing space to being the plus, but otherwise left things alone. And of course, lines get anded together because each line says don't build if this isn't true. And so if you put a bunch of those in a row, the effect is to and all the conditions together. And originally, the only terms you could put on these lines were the operating system, the architecture, and the OS architecture pair. And then a couple months later, in December, we added the terms CGO and no CGO, and we generalized the slash to mean and. So before you could write Windows 386 to mean it has to be Windows and it has to be 386. Now you can write Linux no CGO to mean it has to be Linux and it has to be a non-CGO build. That no is clearly a bit of a problem. It's a good signal that something is wrong. So the next month we fixed that along with some other changes. We added custom build tags, in particular App Engine. We changed the slash to a comma because that seemed a little more defensible as an and sign. And we added a real bang operator for negation of tags. And so now we can write, build this on Linux, but only if CGO's not there, or on App Engine. And then that's the way things stayed up until today. The only change we've made since then was adding the Go 1.1, etc. build tags, which required allowing dot in the tag syntax. All right, so what's the problem here? The problem is that the current expressions allow encoding ands, of ors, of ands, of possible negations of tags, which is good enough for a very large fraction of Boolean expressions. And you can encode any arbitrarily complex Boolean expression if you don't mind them getting a lot bigger as you encode them. But even what we support is pretty deeply nested expression. And each step along the way here made sense because we were preserving compatibility and avoiding any kind of painful migration. But where we've gotten to is itself painful. People just can't remember what these mean for too long. So I want to show you one example of that. Alan Donovan worked on the Go team for many years. He wrote the book, The Go Programming Language. And recently, he and I were working on some code that was targeted at 64-bit systems. And so he wrote these lines that say, only build on Linux or Darwin, and then only build on the 64-bit architectures. And so these two build lines mean this Boolean expression. So then you've got a file that only builds on those systems. You need a file that builds on the other systems. And so you have to negate all of the expressions. And Alan's first attempt at this was to negate the individual lines, which he got right, which is already impressive. But this is not quite the right answer for the fallback file. And of course, you don't notice it's wrong because on your system is like Linux AMD 64, everything's building. And so this fallback file is not even building, and it's not building for a subtle wrong reason. You're not going to notice. So what's wrong with this? Well, what's wrong is that these two lines are still being ANDed together. And if you're going to negate something, you have to negate all the operators, including the implicit AND. There's still an AND here. So to negate that implicit AND and turn it into an OR, you need to join the two lines. So now we have an OR. And mistakes like this, where people don't quite remember what the operators are, or there's an implicit operator that they forget, these happen all the time. If you skim through public Go source code, you find plenty of examples of this. The second problem with this, beyond the Boolean expressions, is the placement of the comments. And again, we got here for reasonable reasons, but where we are is not reasonable. So we decided at the beginning that the placement should be at the top of the file. Just like Go files always begin with a package line and then imports before the rest of the code, so you don't have to look around in the rest of the file to find those, we decided to put the build constraints very early above the package line. That's a great decision. It's good for tools, it's good for people to know that when you open a file, it's going to be right there at the top. The problem is it interacted badly with doc comments. So if you have a file like this, this is fine. There's a build constraint, there's a doc comment, there's a package line. But then if you have this file, GoDoc was showing the build constraint as part of the package doc. And we said, well, that's not really good. And furthermore, you might have a package doc that tries to talk about build lines, and we don't want to confuse those or get confused by those. And so we made a rule that the build comments have to be followed by a blank line before the file proper starts. And so that has the effect of excluding build comments, build constraint lines that appear in doc comments. And so this line is ignored. It is not okay in the sense that it is not used. It's not rejected in any way. And the rule, again, is that the comment has to be followed by a blank line. And this applies even if there isn't a doc comment. This is clearly not a doc comment, but it still doesn't work. And you do see things like this in the wild. This line is completely ignored by the tooling. It has no effect. Actually, it does have an effect. It shows up in GoDoc as a doc comment. Another example of this happens in non-Go source files, where there are definitely not doc comments. And so you often see files that look like this, where there's a build constraint right next to the actual code, which typically starts with an include. And again, this line is completely ignored by the tooling. In general, build constraints are allowed in non-Go source files, but they still have to be followed by blank lines. And this is just very confusing. And then the final problem that we run into is that the rule is actually that the comments have to be preceded only by other line comments, other // comments, or blank lines. But /* comments break the search, partly because I was being lazy and I didn't want to implement that, and partly because we have non-Go source files and I didn't want to make assumptions about what comments look like in all the other files. And so it was easier to just say, the rule is the build constraint has to be very early. The only thing that can come before it is other // comments and blank lines. But people don't know that subtlety, and so a lot of the time you see companies come along and paste their giant 50-line Apache header at the top of a file, and that breaks their builds because now the build lines are not being found because the block comment stops the search. And you can just imagine people scratching their head when they put their license comments and they say, wait, why is my build broken? All I did was add comments. This is clearly not a great situation. So back in March, I went through all the public Go code I could find, which is the latest copy of every module that was on the proxy at the time. And I pulled out all the files that had build lines and I analyzed them. I found 6 different projects that in their latest public commits had definite bugs. There were unsatisfiable conditions in their build lines, and most of the time it was very clear confusion about ands and or, about what meant and what meant or. There were also 98 build lines that were after /* comments and were therefore being ignored. There were 50 build lines inside doc comments that were clearly not part of the doc comment and were also being ignored. And there were even 11 build lines after the package line, which were also being ignored. Now, these numbers are fairly small compared to the 110,000 files I actually found, but this only counts the bugs that made it into the public latest commit of a module without being detected or fixed. You have to assume that there's a lot more debugging and head scratching that goes on before you get to the public commits, or that are in initial public commits but that someone fixes. I didn't look at any of those. So how should we fix this? Well, the first step is let's just use Boolean expressions. Everyone knows how to read those. And the second step is keep the constraints before the code. That was a good rule, but allow skipping over the /* comments. Don't stop the search at that point. Get rid of the dot comment rule. Allow them to appear anywhere before the first line of code. And also, if they do appear later in the file, report that so that users know that that's a mistake and can fix it. So that's a great plan, but then the question is, how do we transition the ecosystem? How do we get from where we are today to where we want to be without breaking the ecosystem? Because old tools won't understand the new syntax. And so we need some way that you can write code that works with the new syntax, but also still works with old tools that haven't updated yet during a transition period. So the solution is to add a new different kind of comment, a different prefix, //go::build, a go build comment. And this matches the go generate comment and other comments that we have. And then also a plan for a transition that keeps these old and new comments in sync while both are needed by the full set of tools that are in use. So to start with, instead of writing these two lines, we'll now be able to write this clearer line. It's a little bit overwhelming to look at, but so are these. This looks clean, but you've got different Boolean operators here that you don't remember are there. This is much clearer about what exactly it means, and you can see the complexity that's hiding in the first one. And even better, if you need to negate this expression, this is how you negate the expression. You add a bang and a paren and another paren, and you're done. The other change is, of course, the relaxed placement. So, this file would be fine. It's part of the doc comment, doesn't matter. Godoc actually strips out lines that look like go::build, go::generate, whatever inside the doc comment now as of go 115. And so totally fine to have that line there. It won't confuse Godoc, won't confuse people, won't confuse the tools. Similarly, if these appear after a block comment, totally fine. If these appear after a block comment in a non-Go file, in a place that would look like a doc comment, totally fine. One thing's not fine. You can't have two lines anymore, because what does that mean? Is it and or is it or? You can pick, but you have to write out what you mean. You can write and, or you can write or. All right, so that's the plan. There's a new go build comment that obsoletes the plus build comment. We have standard Boolean syntax. You only get one of them. The placement rules are better. There's better diagnostics for when they're misplaced. And there's this transition that I want to go over that's deployed over 3 releases. And I'm going to call the releases go1.n-1, which is the preparation, go1.n, which is when the go build comments actually land and you can use them, and go1.n+1, which cleans up after the change. And during this transition, when there are Go releases in the world that are supported that don't know about Go build comments, but there are also Go releases that do know about them, people who write files and want to work with all the supported Go releases are going to need both comments. And so the transition includes tooling to help keep those comments in sync so that it's very difficult for people to accidentally break the Go ecosystem by shipping code that has just Go build comments and not also plus build comments, or Go build comments that are out of sync with the plus build comments. So the first step is preparation in go1.n-1. And in go1.n-1, almost nothing changes. The only change that happens is that the tools recognize and reject Go build files that have Go build comments, but not plus build comments. So go1.n-1 just knows that this change is coming, and it can detect when someone has changed a little too fast and started using the new code without also putting the old lines in. But everyone, tools and people, keep looking for the plus build lines as before. Those are the point of truth. We don't even really widely advertise that Go build is coming. This is just setting up the tools for a more graceful transition. All the interesting stuff happens in go1.n. So in go1.n, the tools start looking for and actually understanding the Go build lines. And then gofunct has a huge role to play here. Gofunct, when it runs on a file that has just plus build lines, will now add the Go build line above it, like in this example. Those two build lines existed, and then gofunct added the Go build line that says what they mean. So this is actually just a really nice documentation piece, if nothing else. And then that block afterwards serves as a sort of clear statement in both the new language and the old language of what you want. As part of this, gofunct will pull up any lines that are too late in the file to be earlier so that they're in the right place. And then moving forward, if you were to change the Go build line, it will actually rewrite the plus build lines to sync them so that the Go build line becomes the point of truth at that point. And just in case you're forgetting to run gofunct, govet, which runs during gotest, the existing build tags vetter in govet will complain if the Go build line and the plus build lines disagree. So at that point, once go1.n is released, we have go1.n-2, which was the last release that knew nothing about Go build lines, and that's unsupported, so we don't have to worry about that anymore. And then we have go1.n-1, which knows just enough to know when it's getting confused because someone has put in Go build lines and not put in the equivalent plus build lines. But it still uses plus build for everything. And then we have go1.n, which recognizes the Go build lines and prefers them and uses them. And so if you have code that's old, that hasn't been updated, that still only has plus build, all the tooling understands. The tooling will never stop understanding plus build lines. If you have code that has a Go build line, but is missing the plus build lines, then go1.n-1 will yell very loudly about that because the plus build lines are missing, so the file will definitely get compiled. And the tooling or the compiler will see, hey, there's a Go build line, but there's no plus build lines. That's definitely something that I don't quite understand, and that's a build failure immediately instead of some mysterious problem about duplicate symbols or missing symbols or something like that. And similarly, if you have a file that has Go build lines and plus build lines and they're out of sync, so that you'd fake out the 1.n-1 check, the govet in 1.n will at least yell at you. And remember that govet runs during gotest. And so if you have a CI system that's running against go1.n and 1.n-1, because those are the Go versions that you release on, then if you, or more importantly, one of your dependencies checks in files that are running a little too far ahead or out of sync, the build will fail very loudly and very clearly about what the problem is instead of having some mysterious failure that you have to debug. So then what happens when we wait one more release? When go1.n+1 comes out, even with no more work, now n-2 and n-1 are unsupported. And so the two supported Go releases, 1.n and 1.n+1, now both understand Go build lines. And so we can replace plus build with Go build anywhere we want. We don't have to keep the plus builds around anymore because now all the supported versions understand Go build lines. And so now it's safe to delete the fallback plus build lines. And so people could do that by hand, but we'll provide a Go fix that removes the plus build lines. And again, this only happens at go1.n+1 because at that point we know that 1.n-1 is no longer supported, and so we don't have to worry about that release anymore, about keeping that release working, keeping code working with that release. But on top of that, we don't want to unconditionally start breaking go1.n-1. So module authors will have to opt into this by explicitly saying in their go.mod that the version of Go they're targeting is 1.n or later. If their go.mod doesn't say 1.n or later, GoFix will still not remove those lines. But if it does say 1.n or later, then GoFix will remove the plus build lines, and now we'll have successfully transitioned to the new Boolean comments. And we're not releasing this until go1.n+1, specifically to prevent people from using it too early, because the safest time when you can use it is 1.n+1. So I want to show you a little demo of this. I've implemented the whole process just to understand it better. This is not necessarily the exact code that would go into the distribution, and it's in no danger of being checked in soon. It definitely needs to be cleaned up some and polished. But just to show you how this works and get a feel for it, First, I have some bad code. It is bad in the sense that these plus build lines are actually in the wrong place in the file. They're doing absolutely nothing. The tooling to date has never complained about that. But now, with the new gofumpt that would ship in go1.n, when you run gofumpt, it says, hey, you know what? I think for the standard formatting, you should be moving these lines up to the top here. And it's also added this go::build line that says what they mean. And so, we could apply that change by hand. We could write the file back out. I'll do that here. Now it looks like this. That's perfect. Now suppose that I decide, I'm editing and I just make a change here and I forget. Or maybe I just delete this whole line and I write it out. Now my editor just suggested that I should put it back because it ran gofumpt on save, but I'm going to ignore that. So this is what the file looks like. Now if I run govet, govet says, the build lines do not match the build condition. Maybe you should fix that. And so we can fix that by just putting in the lines that it wanted. Oh, there we go. Those are the lines that it wanted. And now everything's happy. If we run govet again, no problem. But now suppose we change the go build line. Like we say, actually, this file will work now on Windows. Then there we go. Or suppose we change it to, AMD 64 and not Plan 9. Who knows? There we go. So that all works. And now suppose I run go fix. Go fix did nothing. It printed nothing. It really did nothing. If I reload the file, there's still nothing there. And the reason go fix did nothing is that the go.mod file I have says that I'm targeting Go 1.15, and Go 1.15 is too old for this. It still needs plus build lines. But in my prototype, Go 1.n is 1.99. And so suppose I change the go.mod to say 1.99, and then I run go fix. It says, hey, I ran the build tag fix in x.go. And if I reload it, there it is. The lines are gone. So there we have it. That's the transition. All right. And I just want to point out in the, back when the lines were still here, if I just put a line here, that's enough to make gofumpt fix them again. When the lines are still here, if you needed to negate something, so we had this condition here, and you need to edit it, it's just really nice that you just fix that, you save the file, gofumpt rewrites it as needed, and note the two build lines became one build line exactly as needed. And you can just focus on this single line, and then these are essentially auto-generated, auto-maintained lines that just exist for the transition, and then they're gone once we're done. And at the end, we're just left with the lines that we understand, and we haven't broken anyone in the ecosystem in the process. All right, so to finish up, remember this is a design draft. This is not a proposal. We want to get feedback first. We want to figure out if we're missing something or if this will break people in some way we haven't figured out. Once we've taken care of any problems that people raise and people seem generally happy with it, then we'll put it in the proposal process, which hopefully would go smoothly because everyone has seen it and hopefully is in favor of it already. But again, we're not there yet. We're still at the design draft stage where we're just trying to gather feedback. The core of this design is that there's a new comment, //go::build, go build comments, that replace the existing plus build comments. And the new comments use standard Boolean expression syntax instead of a syntax that is very non-standard and has the operators written implicitly. The new design has more sensible placement rules. It has better tooling for detecting mistakes and fixing them. And to get from where we are today to where we want to be without breaking the ecosystem, we do it with 3 releases for a smooth migration. And the fastest possible timeline on this. Again, this could move forward or it could not happen at all. But it definitely can't happen sooner than this. The fastest possible rollout would be that Go 1.n-1 is Go 1.16 in February 2021. Go 1.n, when you can start using these lines, is Go 1.17 in August 2021. And then the cleanup, when people can start deleting their plus build lines, would be when Go 1.18 comes out in February 2022. There is a detailed design draft that I posted that's at the link below. And there's also going to be a Q&A thread running on Reddit. We're trying to use Reddit this time to see if having threading in our discussions helps. And so the Q&A thread will be there, and we'll see how that goes. That's the whole thing. Feel free to reach out and ask questions, and thanks for watching. Bye.